Susan was 63 years old. She had $11,200 in her savings account, $29,500 spread across 3 credit cards, and a retirement plan that existed mostly as a folder on her kitchen table, unopened since the previous spring. Every month she paid her bills. Every month something unexpected came up. A car repair, a medical copay, her son's rent when he lost his job in February. And every month the credit card balance that was supposed to go down crept back up, quietly, without drama, the way water rises before anyone notices the flood. Susan wasn't reckless. She never took vacations she couldn't afford. She packed her lunch. She drove a car with 140,000 miles on it because it still ran and because a car payment felt irresponsible at this point in her life. By every measure she could see, she was doing the right things. And still, at 63, she was not where she thought she'd be. If that sentence landed somewhere in your chest, if you recognized something in it, then stay with me, because this video is for you. Not for someone younger with decades of compounding ahead of them. For you. For where you actually are right now. And for what you can actually do about it, starting today. I've spent years watching people over 50 make the same financial mistake. Not because they were careless. Not because they were uneducated. But because the advice they were given was designed for someone at 30. It assumed time they no longer had. It assumed a career trajectory that had already peaked. It assumed a clean slate that life had long since complicated. No one showed them the full picture. And by the time someone did, the shame of not knowing had already become its own obstacle. If you're watching this channel for the first time, welcome to the 50 Plus Money Reset. This is a channel built for people who are done with advice that doesn't apply to them. People who have more lived experience than financial runway. People who want real information, delivered plainly, without the theatrics. If that resonates with you, consider subscribing. There's no pressure, but if you stay, I think you'll find something here worth coming back to. Let's start where most financial conversations refuse to go. Here's what most people over 50 don't realize. The debt they're carrying isn't just a financial problem, it's a psychological one. And until you understand the psychology of how it accumulated, no spreadsheet, no debt payoff calculator, no budget app will fix it permanently. Most people in their 50s and 60s didn't accumulate debt because they were living beyond their means in any extravagant sense. They accumulated it because life happened at the exact same time that their financial safety nets were thinnest. A layoff in their late 40s. A divorce that split one household income into 2. A parent who needed caregiving. Children who needed help longer than anyone expected. Medical bills that arrived without warning and without mercy. And here's the thing. No one tells you about debt that accumulates that way. It carries a different weight than debt from overspending. It carries guilt. Because you know, rationally, that you were trying to do the right thing when you ran that credit card. You were trying to keep the lights on. You were trying to make sure your daughter could finish the semester. You were trying to survive. And somehow, that history makes it harder to confront the number, not easier. This is where it becomes dangerous. Because the longer you avoid looking at the number, the more power it holds over you. The more it shapes your decisions, your sleep, your sense of what's possible. Debt you don't look at directly doesn't stay still. It grows. And it grows quietly, which is the worst kind of growth. According to data from the Federal Reserve, nearly 40% of Americans between the ages of 55 and 64 carry non-mortgage debt. We're talking about credit cards, personal loans, medical debt, and in some cases, student loans, their own, or loans they co-signed for their children. The number is not small, and the people carrying it are not a fringe group. They are the majority of working Americans in the decade before retirement. The Social Security Administration confirms what many people in this age group are beginning to feel in their bones. Social Security was never designed to replace your income. It was designed to supplement it. The average monthly benefit is just over $1,500. That's not a comfortable retirement. That's survival math, and it leaves very little room for debt payments. You might be thinking, I already know this. I've known this for years. Why isn't knowing it enough? That is the right question, and the answer is not discipline. It is not willpower. The answer is that knowing something intellectually and knowing what to do about it are two entirely different things. We were never taught the second part. Most of us were told to save, vaguely, and to spend less, vaguely, and to hope that time and compound interest would do the rest. But when you're 60 and carrying debt, time is no longer doing the work for you. You have to do the work, and you have to do it in a way that accounts for your actual life, not a theoretical one. Let me show you something that a lot of people in this situation have never actually calculated for themselves. If you have $25,000 in credit card debt at an average interest rate of 19%, which is close to the current national average, and you pay only the minimum each month, you might be looking at a minimum payment somewhere around $500 to $625 a month. That feels manageable. That feels like progress. But here's what's actually happening. At that rate, you won't pay off that debt in 2 years. You won't pay it off in 5 years. You will be paying that debt for over 15 years. And by the time you're done, you will have paid more in interest than the original debt itself. You borrowed $25,000, you will have paid back more than $55,000. The numbers don't lie. And that math changes everything when you apply it to someone who is 60 years old. 15 years of minimum payments means you're 75 before that card is paid off, if you never add another dollar to it. But most people do add to it, because life continues to happen while debt continues to compound. This isn't meant to frighten you. I want it to make you angry in the quiet, productive way that leads to change. Because the minimum payment system was not designed with your retirement in mind. It was designed to maximize the amount of interest you pay over the longest possible period of time. You deserve to know that plainly. And this is the real issue. Most people over 50 who are in debt are not in debt because they made bad decisions. They are in debt because they made generous decisions for their families, for their children, for their parents, and those decisions compounded over time the same way interest compounds on a credit card. Psychologists have a term for this pattern. They call it deferred self-prioritization. It describes the way that people who spend years in caretaking roles, as parents, as the financially stable sibling, as the person others call in a crisis, develop a nearly automatic habit of placing their own needs at the end of the list, not out of weakness, out of conditioning, out of love. Susan knew this about herself. She could look back and identify every moment where she had chosen someone else's stability over her own financial progress. She didn't regret those choices. But she also understood finally that continuing to make those choices without a counterweight was not sustainable. She had to begin treating her own financial future as an obligation as real and as urgent as any bill she had ever paid. She also had to do something harder. She had to look at the numbers, not approximately, not a rough sense of what she owed. She had to sit down, pull every statement, write every balance, every interest rate, every minimum payment on a single piece of paper, and look at the complete picture without looking away. Susan told me afterward that she had been avoiding that moment for 4 years, that every time she thought about doing it, she found a reason to wait until next month, that the avoidance itself had become its own comfort, because as long as she didn't know the exact number, there was still a version of reality where it wasn't as bad as she feared. When she finally looked, the number was bad, but it was also finite. And finite is something you can work with. So let's talk about what actually works. Not in theory. Not for someone at 35 with a full career ahead of them. For someone at 60 or 62 or 58 with real obligations and real constraints and a real future that is closer than it once was. For the next 30 days, the only thing I want you to focus on is what I call the debt clarity reset. This is not a payoff strategy yet. This is a visibility strategy. Because you cannot solve a problem you cannot see clearly. Pull every single statement, not the ones you remember. Everyone. Credit cards, yes, but also medical bills and collections, personal loans you half forgot, store credit accounts you opened years ago for a furniture purchase and never fully closed, Write the balance. Write the interest rate. Write the minimum payment. Write the due date. Put it all on one sheet of paper or one screen. Then sit with it. Don't make any dramatic decisions that week. Just look at it. Let your brain absorb the reality of it. Because something important happens when you stop avoiding a number and start treating it as information rather than judgment. The fear doesn't disappear, but it becomes workable. You shift from being someone who is overwhelmed by debt to someone who is in a relationship with specific numbers that have specific solutions. That shift matters more than any financial strategy I could give you. Within 90 days, I want you to move into what I call the reallocation audit. The question is not how do I earn more, though we'll get to that, but rather how do I redirect what I already have. Most households, when they look carefully, find between $100 and $250 a month in expenditures that have drifted. Subscriptions that auto-renew for services no longer used. Insurance policies that haven't been reviewed in years. Habits that accumulated slowly and were never consciously chosen. $15 here, $22 there. A streaming service for a trial that converted without notice 18 months ago. This is not about deprivation. This is about intention. Because $150 a month redirected toward your highest interest debt is $1,800 a year working in your favor instead of against you. And $1,800 a year, applied specifically to the balance accruing the most interest, changes the math meaningfully over 3 to 5 years. During this same 90-day period, I want you to make one phone call that most people over 50 never make. Call your credit card company. Tell them you've been a customer for a certain number of years, that you have a history of on-time payments, and that you'd like to request a reduction in your interest rate. That conversation takes 12 minutes. It doesn't always work. But it works more often than people expect, sometimes dropping a rate by 3 to 5 percentage points. And those points are worth more than most people calculate. Over the next 12 months, I want you to begin what I think of as the income alignment strategy. This is not about starting over. It's not about reinvention. It's about identifying where your experience, your specific knowledge, your decades of accumulated skill can generate supplemental income without requiring you to trade energy you don't have. For many people over 50, this looks like consulting in the field they've spent their career in. For others, it looks like teaching, community workshops, adult education classes, online courses built around a skill that feels ordinary to you, but is genuinely valuable to someone younger. For others still, it's freelance work that can be done on your own schedule, without a commute, without a dress code. The goal isn't to replace your income. The goal is to add $300 to $500 a month that goes directly toward debt reduction or toward a retirement account. Because at this stage, every additional dollar going toward either of those things is doing work that time alone can no longer do. I want to say something before we close because I think it needs to be said plainly. If you are 60 years old and carrying debt and feeling behind, you have not failed. You have navigated a financial system that was not designed with your specific life in mind through decades that were not easy for most working Americans, while managing obligations that were real and that mattered. The guilt you may be carrying about past choices, about not starting sooner, about helping people you loved, that guilt does not serve you anymore. It never really did. What serves you now is clarity, a clear view of the numbers, a clear set of priorities, a clear and patient commitment to taking the next step, and then the one after that, without expecting the finish line to appear overnight. Susan is 66 now. She's not wealthy. She doesn't have the retirement account she wished she had at 40, but she has paid off 2 of the 3 credit cards. She has $31,000 set aside in a retirement account she contributes to every month automatically before anything else. She sleeps through the night more often than she doesn't. And she told me recently that the thing that changed everything wasn't the math. It was the moment she stopped treating her financial future as something that would take care of itself and started treating it as something that required her deliberate attention every month, without exception. That's available to you too. Not the exact numbers, your situation is yours, But the shift, the clarity, the decision to look directly at where you are and to take the next step anyway. If you started today, right now, this week, where could you be in 5 years? Not rich, not free of every obligation, but freer, clearer, less afraid, with choices that belong to you rather than decisions that get made for you by interest rates and minimum payments and the slow erosion of money you never consciously directed anywhere. That's worth something, at any age, including this one. I'll leave you with one question, and I'd genuinely like to know your answer in the comments below. What is the one thing you've been avoiding looking at, financially, that you know, if you looked at it clearly, would actually begin to change things? You don't have to share the number, but I'd love to know if you're ready to look. Thank you for being here. If this video gave you something useful, subscribe to the 50+ Money Reset. No promises that can't be kept. Just honest information for people who are ready to take their financial lives seriously, at whatever age they're starting from. I'll see you in the next video.